really excited about this conversation. I'm sure it's a little difficult for some of those following the chairs and their bosses on Capitol Hill, but I know we couldn't ask for a better panel than the one we have today. I think one consistent theme, at least as long as I've been here today, that we're seeing is technology is moving faster than policy, than institutions, and sometimes the governance structures that are the wrapper around all of that. And one of the things that I'd like to zero in on today are the congressional priorities for the remainder of 2026, what we think actually has likelihood. I'm not asking for, I know there are all these gambling sites now. I'm not asking anyone to try to guess what the actual number of passage of different bills are, but generally speaking, what we think can get over the goal line. A little discussion on emerging technology, not only artificial intelligence and some of the executive orders we're seeing pop out there, but I also want to touch on quantum and other priorities Congress may have in the tech space. Then take a little look at strategic competition, take a look at critical infrastructure, where we stand in some of those areas, and then finally, time permitting, what the future looks like. And I love to quote Yogi Berra, which works in a U.S. context, not always overseas, but the future ain't what it used to be. And all these people here are shaping it, though, what it can be and what it ought to be. So I want to start with, and we can start with Moira and then go down the line, and then we'll flip it in other directions for next questions. But where are we in 2026? What do we hope to get over the goal line? And what are you excited about? And what are you concerned about?
I'm a little bit excited for recess next week, but I don't think that's what you're interested in. So at a high point, I think we would put it in two buckets. So we have some, what I would consider housekeeping matters, and then we have some more future proofing matters. So in the housekeeping matters, we have the extension of CISA 2015, WMWIG. I don't know what that means, but I'm sure there's a story that we will learn soon. And congratulations on getting that into NDAA. That's incredibly important as a top priority for all of our members. I think it's a bipartisan priority. So looking forward to getting that across the finish line so that we aren't doing this again next year. Same thing goes with state and local cyber grants. Was encouraged to see funding in the appropriates bill. That's something that our members championed on a bipartisan basis in 2021. And we're very glad to see the progress that the grant investments have made in driving down risk across state and local governments, but there's still a lot of work to do. That initial $1 billion was just level setting about understanding where we are in cybersecurity in state and local governments and where we need to plus up. And with the advent of Mythos and other frontier models, it just accelerates the need to really roll out the tools that can keep state and local governments secure and keep the services that they provide our constituents every day functioning. So that would be another level setting housekeeping matter that we want to maintain. Related to that, as last year when I was here, we talked about the staffing changes at CISA. We're still concerned about the staffing changes. I will say that over the past year, especially over the past 4 months with the new leadership, we have gotten a lot more information from CISA. They've been a lot more responsive to us about what their staffing looks like, what needs they have. Obviously, they're being very proactive about onboarding staffing. The acting director has set good goals for onboarding people in short timelines, which we're happy to see. We want to support that. We want to understand where we're staffing people, though. What we're still looking for is more discrete information about what programs took the biggest hits when people left and took the fork last year. Relatedly, we're still looking for information about where the contracts that were ended last year affected operations. So those are just like housekeeping matters because it's hard to build on an agency when you don't know what you're working with. So we got to kind of know what cards we're holding. And so that's a very big priority for us over the next 6 months as we gear up for the next Congress. Whatever that looks like, we want to make sure that we're ready out of the gate. In terms of future proofing, and this is sort of straddles both buckets, is our committee is working with Alan over here on legislation to authorize the CVE program. We all remember last year the fire drill that we had when we thought that the program wasn't going to be funded anymore. We're happy to see that it is funded, but as we work together to figure out how to stabilize funding for the program, we learned through very just passionate feedback about a program I didn't realize there was so much passion about. It's not exactly a kitchen table issue, but a lot of passion about how the CVE program is operated. A lot of concerns that came up about how it was sort of on autopilot for quite a period of time, and the need to modernize the program, particularly, once again, in the advent of these frontier models that are discovering vulnerabilities at a very rapid pace. We really need to make sure that we are well prepared to understand what the vulnerabilities mean for the systems that we rely on every day, how they can be chained together to have vulnerabilities that we didn't expect to be so sophisticated or so severe, and then prioritize patching effectively. CISA's BODs today, I think, are a step in the right direction. NVD's prioritization, I think, is a step in the right direction, but we really need to be ready so that we can be secure as technology evolves. So that's where we are now. We're hopeful that get done. I'm sorry it took so much.
Oh, that was great. Thank you, Moira. Casey, anything you want to?
Yeah, so Moira really covered it great with WMWIG being one of our primary priorities, obviously, and I think the chairman spoke to that as well. Happy to see that in NDAA. And then also state and local cybersecurity grant program. Our subcommittee chairman, Andy Ogles, put forth his Pillar Act, which passed the House in November of last year. We were happy to see the $50 million, allocated to the states. I think we still have a ways to go, but hosting a hearing just a couple of weeks ago, bringing in state and local cyber officials to kind of be able to illuminate how they've been spending the money, what's been successful, how the threat landscape has changed, and really make it clear to our members and others that, states should not be going toe-to-toe against nation-state adversaries, and the federal government certainly has a role to play there. So eager to see how that moves in the Senate and kind of what additional support we can get there. We've really been focused on AI, as is no surprise. If you kind of look at our website, Moira knows we've been super busy with hearings and roundtables. So we've been holding a series of closed-door roundtables with Frontier AI Labs, startups, cybersecurity companies to kind of talk about the topic of the day. We've been having these about monthly closed-door sessions with the full committee. They've been super well attended, and each iteration of these roundtables comes with a new issue. Mythos obviously has been top of mind, and what that looks like for federal government access, and kind of where we need to go once we have access. What does that mean for patching timelines and things like that? So that's been a really great series, and we're looking forward to kind of building on that, putting pen to paper based off of a lot of the groundwork we've laid in terms of those roundtable series and the hearings we've held on a number of topics.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan.
Hey, folks, thank you for having me. I might seem like a little bit of an odd duck on this panel with this distinguished panel with operational cybersecurity experts, right? What does the Science Committee do in cybersecurity? Well, we do a lot, actually. We're more on the standards and guidelines and workforce side of the equation, but our committee oversees the National Institute of Standards and Technology, whom you all know. We oversee the National Science Foundation, OSTP, and we're really focused on a lot of the critical and emerging technologies. While AI is like a very big topic over the last few years, our committee actually passed the first AI bill back in 2020, the National AI Initiative Act of 2020, that created a lot of the intergovernmental structures that are still around today for how we think about AI, how we do R&D development and testing for these programs. It created the NIST RMF for AI, for example. So we've been focused on a lot of these challenges. I think our three main priorities related to cybersecurity this Congress are thusly. First, we recently reauthorized the National Quantum Initiative Act. It passed through our committee. There are a lot of components in this related to cybersecurity. I'm sure you all are quite aware of the post-quantum cryptography, PQC standards that NIST put together a couple years ago. We're trying to think about how to move the ball on getting the transition ready for people to adopt those standards broadly. Right now, especially in the federal government, implementation has been, not that great. But I'm happy to talk more about quantum later. Another major priority of our committee has been on the AI side of the equation. We haven't passed any AI bills in the last couple of years since the ChatGPT moment, despite passing 13 AI bills out of our committee last Congress. We're hopeful that in the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to have another markup with a lot of AI bills that are top of mind, big priorities. Some that relate directly to cybersecurity, some that relate to workforce development, some that relate to other things that are related. For example, we will likely consider an authorization of CASE, the Center for AI Standards and Innovation at NIST. Sorry, they changed the name recently. I'm trying to get the acronym down. That does a lot of the evaluations for capabilities of what, including cyber capabilities of frontier model systems. And another one that we're looking at is related to vulnerability management. So a lot of the programs that exist currently that Moira talked about, the CVE program and the NVD program, they're not optimized for AI-related vulnerabilities for AI systems, specifically like data poisoning, for example. And we're looking at legislation that can help figure out where there are missing opportunities, how to square that circle and make sure that our existing cybersecurity processes are ready for the AI moment. And then, I'll just foot stomp on everything Moira said around the CVE program and the NVD program. How can we modernize and make sure that these programs are sustainable going forward? Because they're incredibly critical to everyone's cybersecurity, and we want to make sure that lapses, like what happened last year for the CVE program, and kind of the breakdown of the NVD program over the last few years, due to the exponential rise in discovered vulnerabilities, don't happen again.
Oh, and Emily, before you jump in, I just want to underscore that Emily has done yeoman's work supporting a senator who is one of the titans, one of the founding fathers of Homeland and a lot of the cyber issues in terms of Senator Peters, who announced he's retiring from the Senate. So I just wanted to recognize that, and obviously the amazing work you've done to make that happen. So please go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of the priorities for Senator Peters as former chair, now ranking member of Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, HSGAC. We share a lot of the jurisdiction that some of the other folks have here. So we get to share a lot of these priorities and prioritization of efforts. So quickly running down on what we're expecting, what we're excited about for 2026, which, yes, unfortunately will be Senator Peters' last year in the Senate. He has decided to not run for re-election, and he will go on to do much more amazing, better, fantastic things that he is also very excited about. So first and foremost for Senator Peters, getting a long-term extension of CISA 2015. I think just about everybody up here is, we're all rowing that canoe as best we can. It's really critical for industry, really critical for our cyber defenders across the nation. We want to make sure that the folks who are doing the defending from some of these significant cyber attacks have the legal assurances necessary to do their job on a daily basis without necessarily the involvement of a bunch of lawyers. So that's far and away number one. Number two, making sure that there is appropriate funding for our agencies such as CISA and NIST, making sure there's personnel in place to do the job that they need to do to meet congressional intent for the agencies as established. And that also goes towards making sure that some of the programs like state and local cybersecurity grant program have the appropriate level of funding to make sure that states and locals can continue to do that hard work to defend themselves from some of the emerging cyber threats that we're seeing. And the third bucket would be some new fun work that we've started to do over the last 2 years, and that would be mostly on the commerce side. So that's moving a satellite cybersecurity bill, which got marked up a couple months ago in Senate Commerce. And that would authorize a voluntary information sharing platform between commercial satellite owners and operators, and connect them with cybersecurity resources so that there's fewer vulnerabilities in some of those critical satellite systems that we rely on every single day. And fourth would just be continuing to get some of the legacy items across the finish lines. That would be looking forward to that final rule for critical infrastructure incident reporting for CERCIA, which some other folks over here are looking forward to as well, making sure that that final rule meets the congressional intent when the bill was signed into law to create this authority, and ensuring that critical infrastructure owners and operators understand these requirements that may come down from the CERCIA final rule, and helping them, making sure they have the opportunity to give the appropriate feedback. So that's kind of the four big things for this year for Senate and SCAC.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. And I want to jump to the emerging technology discussion. We'll start with you and go down the line this time. And you know, the president recently promulgated an executive order around AI that had a tough balance between innovation and security. Firstly, I'd be curious what your overall take is on the executive order. Did they find sort of that Goldilocks happy medium, or should it shift in one direction or another from your perspective? And then secondly, what do you think the biggest implementation challenges will be? So as with any major directive, whether an executive order, a presidential decision directive, or the like, one thing to get it on paper and get people to agree, not always the same to implement and execute. So I'd be curious what your thoughts are, and we'll go down the line.
Right. Well, as Senator Peters has said publicly that the AI executive order in sum is like great start, but didn't fully meet the mark. It was clear that there was some interesting choices made. So just looking for how this AI executive order actually will be implemented, I think is key. Top level, there were some good things that made it clear that the team in this administration is taking some of these threats very seriously, which we'd like to see. But just making sure that long term, this doesn't just become.
We do look like John Ratcliffe, by the way. CIA's in the room. That's pretty funny. Sorry.
No, you're good. So just making sure that, you know, the actual implementation guidance is something that's reasonable and doable. And I will say that that is one of the big sticklers for Senator Peters, is he has repeatedly said that you can have the loftiest goals possible in some of these executive orders, but if you don't have the personnel at the agencies with the expertise and know-how to carry out these actions, then what are you actually doing there? You have an agency that's tasked with a purpose, with a mission that is unimplementable because you don't have the right people in the room. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of departures at federal agencies like CISA, at NIST. And so that's been one of the big focuses is, yes, and AI executive order and making sure you have the right people in the room.
Thanks, Emily. Alan?
Is that Brad Pitt? So I haven't talked to my boss about the executive order yet, so these opinions are my own. And I would definitely lean on my colleagues who have more operational experience in this area than I do. I'll say a couple comments up top. First, the executive order and the following NSM seem to downplay the role of the Department of Commerce, where a lot of this expertise exists, especially at Casey, in the evaluations of these systems. And they seem to empower agencies I wouldn't normally associate with having expertise over ones that do, like the Department of Treasury over CISA or NIST. These seem concerning to me for two reasons. First, we have spent a lot of resources to create that nexus of intelligence at Casey to be able to do some of this analysis. And to not utilize that seems misappropriate. It seems not appropriate. I would also just say that we want to continue to get more resources into Casey to be able to do this type of work. And I think that aligns with what the president's trying to do with the executive order. I'll also say that it takes some of this work that should be done in the limelight out and makes it more on the secret side. And I'm not saying that it's not appropriate to have secret or top secret research to understand and assess capabilities, but there's less of a ability for Congress and the public to understand what those capabilities are if we're focused primarily on the IC.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts from my perspective. So I think whenever cybersecurity is elevated to a West Wing kind of priority, we see an executive order signed. That's really encouraging. And so I think the AI executive order kind of lays out that public-private partnership is foundational to a lot of these efforts. And I think, again, we're seeing, the stuff that we have been saying for years, the models that we know work, continuing to kind of shine through, and especially bringing in, that clearinghouse framework. I think we're going to be really interested to see how that plays out in effect. I think, we share some questions about Treasury's role versus CISA's, and we have members who have expressed an interest in seeing that CISA maintain a coordination role. They bring expertise. They have teams that are equipped to do this. They, in our view, are the ones that, we really want to see them empowered in this role. So again, I think a step in the right direction. I'm still hopeful to see, additional actions come out of that in other forms. Like, not everything has to be an executive order for things to get done in the FSEB. So that's certainly kind of, I think, the perspective that we're bringing to this.
Moira.
I would say that, much like my colleagues have said, some direction is better than no direction, which is where we were 2 weeks ago. Having said that, very early in the administration, the president rescinded President Biden's AI executive order, which dictated policy not only on cybersecurity, but impacts on workforce, privacy and civil liberties, innovation, et cetera. This was a very narrow executive order that leaves a lot of other really important issues related to AI still on the table. So I think that's a concern for many of our members, number one. Number two, as my colleagues have also said, the delegation of certain authorities to Department of Treasury is bizarre. I mean, it's clearly personality driven in my view, and I'm not an expert on this administration, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think the logic that the financial services industry is advanced on this, so we should just give it to Treasury, denies like decades worth of doctrine about which agencies carry out different roles and responsibilities. And that's not how we make policy that endures over time. So putting an AI cybersecurity clearinghouse at Treasury instead of CISA, to me, makes no sense when CISA already is responsible for cataloging vulnerabilities, however they're found, whether they're found through AI or found some other way. Similarly, as Alan mentioned, NIST has expertise in evaluating AI models. So why you would have Treasury leading on the framework to evaluate whether or not something is a frontier model, NSA dictating that it is a frontier model, and then a host of people led by Treasury deciding who gets access to these models on a voluntary basis doesn't, to me, make a ton of sense, and it ignores the expertise that exists across government. I think what it also ignores as we rush to deploy these models across the federal government is that we are missing talent in CIO offices that would be responsible for deploying these tools. And so we don't know how we're deploying them securely and who's writing the governance models for AI deployment at these agencies. And that's really important. Otherwise, we're going to have people using shadow AI. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and I'm glad they got something out. I think from our perspective, it would be an interesting opportunity to collaborate and engage more with the executive branch on the direction they continue to take this in, and see if we can course correct a little bit on some of the roles and responsibilities in the executive order. I also agree with Alan on the NSM or NPSM, I can't remember the acronym now, but we all know what I'm talking about, released last Friday, about the focus on the IC role in AI and wanting to make sure that there's transparency in how the government is evaluating these technologies.
I want to ask a follow-up. I mean, it is a challenging set of issues. I mean, we can't unilaterally disarm ourselves and let other countries, notably one pacing country, China, take the lead in AI deployment. But the flip side is there are legitimate security questions, and it's a tough balance. I mean, to think that we would have everyone would agree on anything, I think is actually troubling, because we talk about transformative technology. I think we're seeing it as we speak. And I'd be curious, sort of as a follow-up here, a lot of our systems and structures are sort of analog when we're looking at a whole new world. Are we ready to absorb? The KEV list the known exploited vulnerability list that CISA holds had about 1,500 vulnerabilities on that, based on guests I've had on our podcast and others who've been part of Glasswing. That's quadrupled instantaneously. A lot of our processes are not ready for the change. So I'd be curious if you disagree with that approach. And then secondly, and this may be me, and I've never had an unspoken thought, and I have a lot of opinions, but has the public-private partnership we've known, and I've always been a voice saying long on nouns, short on verbs, but it's being flipped on its head. The biggest breakthroughs are not necessarily going to come out of government now. It's going to come out of industry. And when I say industry, it's a small community within industry, yet our critical infrastructure owner operators that keep our lights on, that keep our economy going, that keep our war fighters ready are all dependent upon some of that. So I'd be curious what your thoughts are there in terms of whether that partnership needs to change, and if so, what that could look like. And Alan, I'll give you a chance to get out of that question to go a little deeper on quantum, because I know you're doing some really interesting work there. So Alan, why don't we start with you, and then Casey, you're going to get the first question next go around. So
I'll take the first question you said first, and then maybe talk about quantum.
Please.
What I'll say is yes, the way that you presuppose that question is correct. We're starting to see a lot of the manual processes break down for vulnerability management. A core theme of the bill that Moira and I have been working on around CVE and NVD is how do you modernize and automate some of these existing processes for vulnerability management so that people, you don't have one person in double checking and rechecking CVEs when they come to the National Vulnerability Database at NIST, for example. And I think both agencies have taken that to heart, and they're looking at how to automate, how to streamline those processes. A couple of weeks ago, NIST itself basically threw in the towel a little bit on a lot of their how they were enriching data that went into the NVD, and said, we're only going to enrich ones that are like high priority, right? They themselves came to that decision because there was a massive backlog in the amount of vulnerability data that they needed to put into the database. So yes, we're seeing that in real time, and I would expect a significant tsunami of vulnerability discovery.
Not typhoon, but you're impressive.
We'll go with tsunami rather than to come, and a lot of folks are not ready, and we're going to have to work through that. Speaking of none of that, quantum.
Stop. Next.
So we first moved a big quantum bill 5-6 years ago. The National Quantum Initiative Act. I guess it was in 2018. So over that. And I think the first iteration of this bill was really looking at, what do we need to do to advance this technology that is so far away. It was very focused on simple, basic research. And now we're at the stage where we're trying to move to later TRL levels in advance of potential quantum capable machines at sufficient scale that could, in theory, do Shor's algorithm. We're going to start seeing major machines come online as soon as next year. And it's still to be determined whether that threat is real. But in advance of it, we really need to get our security ready, right? Not only for schemes that are collect now, decrypt later in the national security space, but also in case one of these systems comes online and at a time scale that we're not prepared for. So starting in 2016, NIST did this process with everyone around the world to develop post-quantum cryptography algorithms. And they finished that, I think, a little over a year and a half ago. Those algorithms are published. In advance of those algorithms being published, we worked with the Oversight Committee and HSDF to do a bill that would allow the federal government to be ready to move on those algorithms and adopt them in their systems, but money never followed. A lot of the implementation has been sparing, and so we're looking at ways to help speed up some of that implementation. I would actually go to Emily to talk about her boss's bill to do some of this from a federal like coordinative standpoint. But what I would say from our bill is it's more on the technical assistance side. How do we get more resources out there? How do we help sectors that are more at risk adopt these technologies quicker? And NIST is key to that. So it's developing a grant and technical assistance program at NIST.
Can I put you on the spot for one? So, and obviously it's all of the above, but if you had to choose, is this a PQE issue, a PQC issue, or where do you think, and I think there's this belief that wait till it comes, and obviously that's too late, but I still hear that, oh, I don't have to worry about that right now. Where would you put, if you had limited dollars you could spend right now, where would it be?
It would be in sectors like financial services that are uniquely at risk of like having their entire kernel owned in the event that these systems come online. It wouldn't necessarily be at your mom and pop water utility, because really a lot of this will be about stealing information in the
beginning.
Yeah. And also other types of remediations can help.
Casey, any thoughts on the initial question? I forgot what I asked already.
Yeah, so in terms of kind of like meeting the moment and kind of how quickly we're moving, I think, as I kind of mentioned at the offset, we're focused a lot on AI and national security matters, but it's really been from kind of a perspective of educating our members, getting them in the room, giving them demos of new capabilities that are coming out of the frontier labs, giving them hands-on, experience with some of these models, and seeing kind of where, jailbreaks can happen or kind of other risks to those models. So I think, frankly, it's this like regulatory landscape is just not meeting the pace of the advancements that we're seeing. And so I think that creates so much uncertainty. And I think that's really kind of the main challenge that I see, especially when you look, this goes far beyond the federal government. This goes to state and local levels and critical infrastructure as well. Without kind of this idea of a governance model and something that's more coherent, we're seeing a patchwork. We're seeing people have a lack of trust in a lot of these new technologies. And I think ultimately that kind of puts us in bad footing in terms of deploying US led technology internally, but like globally as well. And so I think there's just a lot of questions that remain in terms of where are we going around governance, and then how can we kind of build trust and accountability into these systems. And then on the public-private partnership piece, just what I'll say there is we've been really hyper-focused on seeing, Anchor CI, which is kind of this like CPAC public-private partnership framework, be restored. I think we really need that to get some consensus-driven decisions made between the public and private sectors. So just putting in a plug for that, and we hope to see that out of DHS soon. Extra
points for bringing up CPAC. Moira, Emily, on this question.
Yeah, I would just say that I agree with everything Casey said. From a policy perspective, we're sort of building the plane while we're flying it as we deploy AI models, and it's evolving faster than policymakers can keep up, which I think also feeds into your second question about the role of public-private partnership, because right now we have the private sector taking on the role that the government normally would. So they have these frontier dual use models that they're deciding how they're going to put the guardrails on, when they're going to release them. We don't know who's responsible for it when something goes wrong. And I think those are kind of critical questions that we need answers to. And as I don't want to beat a dead horse on this, but the staffing issue in government continues to be a problem, both for policy development and responsible deployment. What's the second part of the question? I keep forgetting. Public-private partnerships. I think I covered that enough. But
Emily, and if I can ask quick, because I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for one question in the audience, is where we're going to be.
Absolutely. So very quickly, public-private partnership is really key for what we see the future when it comes to quantum, when it comes to AI, when it comes to cybersecurity. You can't just have one sector racing forward without working alongside and in between the federal agencies and other sectors as well. So that is one of the biggest things that Senator Peters has been pushing for with this administration, is making sure that there is that communication back and forth and ability to work with various different sectors across the nation through CIPAC and others, making sure there's an opportunity there for industry folks to weigh in, for state and local governments to weigh in. Those are critical when it comes to federal agencies making decisions about how they want to react, how they want to deal with some of these emerging tech issues, such as some of these really advanced AI models and quantum as well. So just quickly on the quantum bill, that is definitely one of the things that we're looking for with Senator Peters and National Quantum Readiness and Innovation Act is trying to use federal agencies to drive the model for what quantum preparedness looks like. And what we've seen is that some of the federal agencies are hesitant to potentially adopt post-quantum cryptography. They're not really certain how to procure it, how to implement it, how to deal with it as like a bigger question. So this would require some of those implementation pieces and procurement pieces over a timeline, focusing on some of the most critical systems first.
Emily, thank you. And I had like 10 other questions I wanted to get through, but I want to make sure we have time for a question from the audience. But let me ask, lightning round. If China had come out with Mythos, would there be a press conference? Would we have responsible use, or would we find out after we're owned? Yes, no, simple.
I think you would see quite a few people in government running around DC.
We would be
very
owned.
Scared.
All right, one question from the audience. Anyone brave enough to jump up real fast? If not, I will ask one last question. Please.
Yeah, like the intro that Alan made, being an engineer or scientist in the midst of cyber technologies. But as we see, forward looking, we have so many scientific developments, call it applied science, merging with technology. So 6G is coming up, post-quantum computing, and thanks you dealt with it a lot there. And so there's a convergence of science and technology, and of course the threat actors, more capabilities are being developed, but of course the exposure is a bit more maybe stronger in terms of maybe vulnerabilities or attacks, and how is policy going to shape maybe the capability for the government to actually build momentum within both the industry and government, and policies to enhance, to sort of encourage funding in private partnership, so that the threat actors that we see from external are not well above our capabilities. In other words, our defensive system strong enough to overcome the offensive threats out there. Over.
Good question, Alan. I think that was aimed largely, and anyone else who wants to jump in.
I'll take a little bit of that question. You asked, like, how do we reduce the asymmetric advantage of? Yeah, it's very hard, right? It's an incredible challenge. We've actually tried to look for one of my kind of things that I often find upsetting when people talk about AI for cybersecurity. It's like a lot of my colleagues are like, yeah, but it'll improve defense just as much as it'll improve attack. Like, yeah, but you have to implement it. And like, we don't have confidence in how some of these systems are designed to do defense. And there's huge asymmetric advantage. Anyway, we have over the years tried to do some Band-Aids to solve some of these problems, but they are just that. They're Band-Aids, right? And so it's a really hard challenge. One of the ones that we're currently looking at is in OT cybersecurity, where you have basically a bunch of water utilities that are leaky buckets for cybersecurity challenges, right? How much can you actually patch to solve these problems? Maybe you have to just not do cybersecurity solutions and engineer your way out of catastrophe. And so we're trying to look at, take a kitchen sink approach to some of these things, but how can we move the ball forward on engineering to deal with cybersecurity? That's like one example, but it's going to defer. It's going to change depending on the technology, depending on the actor, the context. Like it's a really hard challenge.
Anyone else want to jump on that real quick? Awesome. I'm going to answer it just real fast because I think first mover matters here. There's no question in my eyes that the initiative remains with the attacker, but that's okay because you learn from the attacker to improve Blue. Please join me in thanking an amazing panel here doing important work. So thank you.